Welcome all. Thank you so very much for logging in to the keynote and final event of the 10th Annual Women in STEM Summit, Embodying Resilience. My name is Rose Ampuero. I use she, her, herself pronouns, and I am the Interim Associate Dean of Student Affairs and one of the Chief Inclusivity Officers at Tandon. I hope everyone is doing well and dedicating some time for self-care. As we continue to navigate the pandemic, I want to emphasize how important it is to ensure our mental and physiological well-being as we have been discussing this entire week. We would like to start by honoring the Lenape people whose land we now occupy and recognize the significance of these lands for the Lenape nations past and present. New York City has the largest urban Native population in the United States, and we believe that historical awareness of Indigenous exclusion and erasure is critically important and are committed to working to overcome their effects in our educational institutions. I am super excited about our program tonight. We have brought in some of the best minds to discuss resiliency and how we move forward in the pandemic. It's no secret that women and BIPOC populations have been disproportionately affected, and the recovery will be a monumental task. I hope this discussion will remind our students that you are strong enough, smart enough, and skilled enough to take the STEM industry by storm. Before our panel gets started, I'd like to remind you that we will have time for audience questions at the end of the program. You can send your questions using the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen, and kindly denote if they are for a specific panelist or the moderator. The recording for this session will be emailed to all who registered in the following weeks. Lastly, if you are on social media while listening tonight, you can tag us and use the hashtags Women Rising and Tandon WISS 2021, which will be noted in the chat. And now it is my sincere pleasure to introduce our moderator for this evening, Dr. Chris Day, Vice Provost at NYU.
Thank you, Rose. It's a pleasure to be here. Welcome everyone to the keynote panel on embodying resilience. And as many of you are already aware, this keynote panel is part of the 10th annual Women in STEM Summit at New York University's Tandon School of Engineering. So I'm Chris Day, I'm Vice Provost, and I'm also very proud to say that I'm a faculty member in the Tandon School of Engineering. My own background is in urban planning and design, and I'm thrilled to be here with our panelists this evening to discuss the topic of our panel, which is on the theme of heal together and rise together. So this whole week, for those of you who have been joining for various activities, has dealt with different aspects of this theme. It's been featuring women who are discussing various aspects of their personal journeys, and especially how 2020 has changed their lives, and the importance of embracing resilience. So for this special event tonight, we're going to be focusing on how current events, and we all know how complex those are. This would include things like the Black Lives Matter movement, the current COVID pandemic, the legal and political situation. So we're going to be looking at how all of these events are affecting all of our personal and professional lives. And we've invited our panelists to talk about their personal responses, both in terms of their work lives, but also their personal lives and the lives of their companies or their institutions or their organizations, how they are responding to these difficult times. And they're going to talk about how women, and especially all of us as women in STEM, can heal and rise together in this current moment. And then finally, they've promised to share a few strategies that they think others may be able to use that help all of us think about embodying resilience and adapting. So let's get started. I'll invite all of our panelists to join. Fantastic, thank you. I'm going to call on each of you and ask if you would introduce yourself briefly, and then we'll jump into the questions. And so I'm going to start with the order that you appear on my screen. So Rose, Bear Don't Walk. Would you introduce yourself?
Yeah, Ches Chalu Pesia. Hi, everyone. My name is Rose Bear Don't Walk. I am from Montana. I currently live on the Flathead Indian Reservation here. I am Bitterroot, Salish, and Crow, which are both tribal nations of Montana. And currently, I work as a consultant with a company called Indigenous Pact. And we work with tribal communities and tribal nations in issues of health and healthcare. In addition to that, I also am a 500 Women Scientist Fellow for the Future, and just recently graduated from the University of Montana with my Master's of Science in Environmental Studies. And I'm really excited to be here and just learn as much as I can from my fellow panelists. Thanks.
Thank you. That's wonderful. Next, I'll invite Yelena Kovachovic.
Thanks, Chris. It's wonderful to be here with these amazing women. I love being at the School of Engineering, where very often on these calls, I see, we start asking ourselves, where are the guys, right? So it's great to be here. I was born and raised in Serbia, in Belgrade, came here a long time ago. To study for my doctorate in electrical engineering, then spent some 11 years at Bell Labs and 15 at Carnegie Mellon, and started at NYU in 2018. I think I normally don't say this, but I think for this panel, it's important. I'm the first woman dean of the school, and the history dates back to 1854. So I'm very proud of this, not only for women, but also not only for girls, but also for boys. They should see women in, position of authority and, with expertise, and start imagining, the world in which this is, a normal thing. So I'll stop here and let Chris continue with the introductions. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you so much. And then can I invite Calbeth Alaribe to introduce yourself?
Yes. Hi, everyone. My name is Calbeth Alaribe. I'm from Reno, Nevada, but currently living in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm currently a PA student or physician assistant student at the Morehouse School of Medicine. Before that, I received my master's in public health focused on global health from Emory University. And prior to PA school, I also served as a chapter development lead for Women in Global Health, an organization focused on achieving gender equality in healthcare leadership. And currently, I serve as the co-chair and co-founder for the Nigerian chapter of Women in Global Health. And I also serve as an advisory board member for the Georgia chapter in the US. So thank you, everyone.
That's excellent. Thank you. So Calbeth, if I may, I'm going to direct the first question to you to start, and then I'll ask each of our panelists to chime in. So could you tell us a little bit about what motivated you to pursue a career in STEM, either what or maybe who?
Yes. So as a PA student, I'm currently trying to practice medicine. And the people that motivated me to pursue a career in STEM are my parents. So I'm currently, like I mentioned, I'm a first generation Nigerian American. And I remember going with my parents to Nigeria almost every other year and growing up, and then seeing a lot of the health disparities that arise in the country, and realizing that I not only wanted to provide resources, but I also wanted to improve their access to quality healthcare. So that really drove me into the field of medicine. And after realizing that I truly wanted to help not only individuals and communities in Nigeria, but also around the world, including the US as well. So that's what my parents are the ones that kind of pushed me and encouraged me to pursue a career in STEM. And I haven't looked back since.
That's excellent. That's inspiring. Rose, could you tell us, how about for yourself? What or who got you into a STEM career?
Yeah, I got so excited to introduce myself. I forgot to mention that my science is ethnobotany. So I'm an indigenous ethnobotanist, which basically means that I study the relationship between plants and people. Specifically, I research my tribe, the Salish people, and their longstanding relationships formed with food plants over time. but I came really late to the game into the science world, I guess. I got my bachelor's from Yale University in political science. And, you know, the shift from policy to STEM was kind of a big leap for me, but it connected all the things that I was really passionate about, which was food systems and health and how we can improve our holistic wellness as tribal people. And doing so in a way that connects us with our culture and our roots, so to speak. So I think I just, I came to STEM by wanting to make a difference in my community and our food systems. And that pathway led me to traditional food plants, because it is a practice that we don't have in our communities as much as we do hunting and fishing, which is a way of providing food for our community. So I think I went to one class called Plants and Culture, and in that class it was led by Robin Kimmerer, and she's an amazing indigenous ethnobotanist. And I was just like, plants are really cool. I wish I could be in one spot and make my own food and protect myself and not have to go anywhere for that. And I just went with it. I was just like, I really want to know more about traditional food plants and how plants and people are connected.
That's so interesting. Thank you. Yelena, I'll ask you the same question. What inspired you to go into STEM, or maybe who?
So I started with M in STEM, math. I loved math since I was a little girl. I cannot not wanting to do something with math. And my dad used to play all kinds of games with me involving crepes, pancakes, and sort of saying, your mom ate 5 and your brother ate 3, how many are left for you? I have a picture at some point, I'll share it with you, what the result was and how I looked like a little kid, as a result of all those crepes. But then, I continued doing that and eventually went to an electrical engineering. So that's the E part of STEM. To be honest, not because I knew what electrical engineering was, but because somebody told me you could do math there. I said, oh, cool, I'll go there, I'll do math. And then I found out you could do really fun math that, actually has impact. So my work has been mostly on extracting knowledge from data, and data can be anything like, for example, medical images. And I spent a lot of time working on biological and medical images. You can think of using math to build models and then create algorithms that can extract, even an automated diagnosis or help for a doctor. And just to illustrate it, one of the projects I've been working on was on diagnosing middle ear infection based on images. Interestingly enough, the pediatricians are not very good at that, not because, they can't learn, but because the images that are taken of the tympanic membrane, you've all had the otoscope put in your ear. The ones of the infected ear look very much similar to those of the non-infected ear. And so as a result, lots of antibiotics or too many antibiotics are prescribed. And we all know that that's not good. It's expensive. It leads to resistance. And so if you can find a way of, in a reproducible way, figuring out, whether it is an acute infection with bacterial infection or not, that's very useful. And so just to give you an example, pediatricians are close to 80% correct, while an algorithm that we developed with MDs at the University of Pittsburgh Medical School are 95% correct. Not to say we are great, but it's just that, once you find the way, it's a reproducible way of doing it. But however, I don't do much of this right now. I'm the dean of the school and I'm taking care of a whole lot of people, but that's my journey in STEM. Thank you.
That's excellent. Thank you. I'm going to open the next question up to all 3 of you. So please just jump in if you'd like to answer this question. I'm curious if you could tell us a little bit about how the past year has changed your work life. Have you had any career changes? Are you doing things in different ways? How's the past year affected you?
I'll go.
Thank you.
So I think for so many people around the world, this year has been, last year has been and this year as well, has been very tragic and shocking. And I've decided to approach my school and work life with a sense of purpose. So I constantly ask myself, what am I doing, and does it make me happy? And as well as, does it have a positive impact on myself and other people? And if I can answer those questions with a yes, then I feel like that I've made the right decision. So I started this mindset, like I stated, towards the end of 2020, which led me to do things that I found purposeful while in school. For example, I decided to enter an MIT hackathon. It was an inaugural hackathon focused on dismantling racism in healthcare. And during the 48 hours that I was in this hackathon, my team and I, we created a solution that would dismantle racism. And my team ended up winning out of 20 other teams across the world. So with this win, I decided to turn this idea into a health tech startup, which I'm currently still developing. I never realized that I would have a passion for merging medicine and healthcare or health tech, let alone start my own company. But because I've been more intentional with my work and with life in general, I've been able to open doors I never knew existed, which has been very rewarding.
That's excellent. What an inspiring response. That's great. How about other panelists? Can you reflect on any ways that this year has changed your careers, your work life?
Rose, how about you? I feel like I am the host, the tandem host, so I will go last.
Oh, that's very nice of you. Well, so I think I got very lucky in a sense that I was able to graduate with my master's kind of before everything happened. And in that process, I had already started working for Indigenous Pact. And I'm super grateful that a lot of our work is remote. Although when we start working with tribal nations and clients, we will go out and see them and do on-site visits. So a lot of that stopped. But being able to engage on digital platforms has been really helpful for us, and we can still do our work and still, just be cognizant of what is going on in different tribal communities, just because COVID has become just a huge, huge factor in how a lot of communities operate, and it's hit Indian country very, very hard. So we've just lend our ear to that and made sure that our clients are doing well, and that we can provide them, whatever expertise we can. And then on the flip side of that, I live here in Montana, and part of my work with 500 Women Scientists was to start doing community workshops with all the tribal people that live in this area. And so part of that was doing ethnobotany workshops, going out and harvesting different food plants, identifying them, bringing them back in, preparing them, and just kind of reviving that connection. And that couldn't happen in a pandemic. So I had to, I think this year has really challenged me to think of new ways that I could connect with people and connect with place and land. So I started doing bi-weekly newsletters for community members, basically detailing all of the things that I would go over in a workshop. Say, this plant is in season, here's how to properly process it and pick it. Here's the Salish name for it. How do we learn to create a relationship with this plant? And then I just put all that information together and sent it out to community members, because even though we are in a pandemic, we still have access to land, and we still have the ability to create a connection there. So that's something that really just pushed me to just be creative and think of ways that I could get other people to engage with the land in a positive way while we're all still kind of, separated from each other. So that was a really cool thing that came out of this whole process.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I bet that's going to be a theme in our discussion tonight. Both sort of creativity and also that connection. I expect we're going to be hearing more about that. Yelena, how about you? Can you share how this year has changed your work? Any career changes?
Well, I mean, title-wise, no, right? But being a dean has always meant ensuring that the faculty members and students especially can thrive intellectually, and that they have the resources and the environment that they need to learn and grow and do research that makes a difference in our lives. But last year, it was really a trifecta of pandemic, civic unrest, protesting, systemic racism, attacks on our democracy. I think everything we did was even more, if I can steal your words, Calbeth, intentional. So it had really more meaning. It meant that you have to keep people physically safe because we opened for instruction in person, but also emotionally, as we all know how hard this was. And, many of our community members suffered a great deal. Some have lost family members. Some have, family members have lost jobs. Our students, had to leave. Some of them, sort of on a moment's notice. A number of the communities in our school across NYU and in general have been disproportionately affected by what was happening. So in some sense, it was relentless work in thinking about how to do things we do normally in this new environment. But at the same time, we started thinking of how those things that we do now and we think about, we can kind of leverage strategically so that going forward, we can do them better. And each one of these has challenged us to come up with new ways of thinking, right? And that has been both, how shall I say, it has been hard, but it has also been humbling and eye-opening in so many ways. And I can say also personally that I think I have learned and hopefully grew some during this past year.
Yeah, thank you. And I hear that as a theme across all three of your responses to this notion of part of what your work has been over the past year, it sounds like, has been caregiving. So responding to the pandemic has meant pulling on your own resilience, but also this big component of taking care of others at scales that might vary, or details that might vary. That's really interesting. Maybe Yelena, you gave us a theme that we could explore a little bit further, which is building on this notion of how you yourself have responded to the pandemic. Can you reflect a little bit about how your institutions have responded, or how the schools or organizations, companies that you're part of have responded? And that might be in terms of institutional response, how are they responding to the events of the past year? Or it might be more the people around you, the creative resilience that you see in the people that you work with. Calbeth, do you want to get us started?
Yes, I do. So in the past, we faced, especially with the US, we faced racism, health policies, and clinical experiments that have targeted especially Latinx or Latinx and Black communities. So we have from Tuskegee experiments, which have been very detrimental to Black communities throughout American medical history, to socioeconomic and health disparities in the US healthcare system that have just disproportionately affected underserved communities. These are very real reasons as to why a lot of these communities fear COVID control efforts, such as the vaccine. So currently at my school, at Morehouse School of Medicine, they're part of the Atlanta University Center for Coronavirus Task Force. And they've been doing a really great job in educating underserved communities and vulnerable communities about the significance of the virus, understanding the fear of community members, and then dismantling their myths about the virus. And they've currently been vaccinating hundreds of community members every Saturday. So that's something that they've done to help with the COVID efforts. And then with Women in Global Health, they've been at the forefront as well in leading COVID pandemic efforts in response to the lack of female representation. In the initial COVID-19 response, they launched 50/50, or WGH launched 50/50, Operation 50/50. And it was in partnership with Women of Color Advancing Peace and Security. And they worked to change gender inequality and female representation during COVID by compiling a list of women experts who are currently trying to strengthen global, regional, national capacities to prevent the outbreak. And they provided this information to the World Health Organization to utilize to invite women focused on making and shaping policies regarding COVID. So those are certain aspects that both from an institutional level that I'm currently in at the Morehouse School of Medicine, as well as with my work with Women in Global Health, have done to help shape what's currently going on with the pandemic.
That's so interesting. Because of your work with Women in Global Health, has that given you access to seeing differences in global responses to the pandemic and different ways that people are being resilient in their responses?
Oh, definitely. Especially with my work with Women in Global Health Nigeria, you definitely see a lot of the issues that arise when it comes to efforts that are global, especially in the global South, where there's lack of resources to provide to the citizens over there to help control the spread of the pandemic. And then you see, can kind of compare it to the US, and you see, the US is, although it's very controversial, a lot of, political issues that arise, but you see that they do have a strong force in terms of trying to overcome what's been going on with the pandemic. But in Nigeria, of course, with the political climate, lack of resources, as well as leadership, people put in leadership, you see that there's a lot of members that are not so focused on actual community members, but they're more so focused on the needs of the people higher up. So it's quite unfortunate. But with Women in Global Health Nigeria, that's what we're trying to do in terms of trying to give women the voice to partake in the decision-making process, getting them to top leadership positions so that they can have say when it comes to their specific communities and how they work towards, the pandemic or just anything in general in relation to health.
That's excellent. Rose, how about you? Can you reflect a little on how are the institutions or workplaces that you're part of, how are they responding to the current moment, which might be responding to COVID, or it might be responding to the civil unrest or environmental injustice situation?
Yeah, I think, when I think about institutions that I'm a part of, I really look to my tribal government and how they have been handling the pandemic. And it's just been, it's been very interesting to see how the state is handling it as opposed to various tribal governments in Montana, because tribal governments are sovereign nations and they have a government to government relationship with the federal government. They can make their own laws and they can make their essentially make their own rules for the lands that they inhabit. So while Montana is becoming very lax about the pandemic and has been kind of lax in the past, and we've had numbers that have skyrocketed, a lot of tribal governments have really just pulled the reins in and done their best to try and protect their citizens, because it has become so big in our communities. I mean, there was a headline I saw a couple months ago about the Northern Cheyenne Nation, and they had lost a tribal elder pretty much every day for 2 weeks.
Wow.
And so we're losing libraries, we're losing so many connections to who we are as people. And I think that has really hit hard in a lot of tribal nations. And so some of our efforts have just included, really figuring out ways to share culture, share language. There's been a lot of efforts to do like at-home language studies. So, just big Zoom groups of people that are wanting to learn the language just because we have lost so much and we continue to lose a lot to this virus. And so my tribe has just really, enforced the rules of the CDC. We wear masks on the reservation, and that's a very big thing, even though Montana has lifted the mask mandate in other areas. So really just doing their best to protect their people, but also, how we can become resilient in revitalizing and using our culture to really help us stay grounded when a lot of us really can't have those interactions with our families, or go see an elder for a question or something along those lines. So really a lot of it is just coming to embodying who we are as people, but also knowing that we've survived various epidemics in the past, and so we know how to get through this in the best way that we can. And doing so means really just buckling down on how to protect ourselves, protect our culture, and protect our families.
That's excellent. What positive examples. That's terrific. Yelena, could you share a little bit about how the institutions or organizations that you're part of are changing? How have they responded?
Absolutely. So I like to say that when the pandemic hit, we at NYU and NYU Tandon hit back. And that, goes well beyond following all the public health guidelines and, figuring out how to bring the students back. I sort of feel like we all felt we are warriors in a common war. And, I'm very proud of what people have done and how they have done it. It kind of brings back sort of faith into what we can all do. And it also, the pandemic made sort of put into very sharp focus that when the unexpected happens, the thinking has to be unconventional. So people immediately found ways to pivot their research. Our electrical engineers dove in to develop new remote medical devices. Our data scientists studied how the virus was spreading. The biochemical engineers worked to develop new methods of screening for the disease. Everyone in our makerspace pitched in to design and manufacture PPEs and ventilator parts, just to give you a few examples. And the issues that you also brought up of social and environmental justice are especially interesting at an engineering school, because it may seem that they don't really touch us directly. Of course, and obviously we want our school itself and our community to be a place where everyone feels welcome and respected and everyone is treated equitably. I don't know if you know, but Tandon recently appointed a team in the year of unconventional, unprecedented, uncommon. We have, instead of one chief inclusivity officer, we have 4 of them, and Rose is one of them. And together, we work to create an atmosphere that we can be proud of. But because we're an engineering school, we can do even, we can go further. We can actually use engineering to build a more just and equitable future, if you want, for everyone, not just those who are affiliated with us. So we have AI researchers who are rooting out implicit bias in algorithmic systems. And we know that such bias disproportionately, again, affects, underrepresented communities. Computer scientists are ensuring that operating systems are accessible to the differently abled. There are wireless researchers who are working to narrow the digital divide, and data scientists who are using mathematical models to show disparities in access, for example, to telemedicine along racial and socioeconomic lines. And specifically with regards to environmental justice, of course, I could not be happier to hear and know that the US rejoined the Paris Accord. But climate change is very real. We need to commit to fighting it to diminish global warming. I'm not sure that if everyone here is aware, but we have an urban future lab that's located in 370 J Street, right? Basically that's our building, NYU building. And it's a part of our larger entrepreneurial network here at Tandon and has been working for years to combat global warming. We have faculty in the chemical and biomolecular engineering department who are developing cleaner petrochemical processes, which will not only reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but will create storable energy that can help power the plant or even the adjoining community. Not to mention a number of projects our students are working on. And this generation of students is extremely passionate and committed to making a mark and not just working in a narrow local environment, but thinking of, what is it that they can do to make an impact on the world around them. And when they leave our halls and buildings and so on, they go into companies and they demand more. And you can read this every day, right? It's not anymore that they just accept what is out there. They are actually asking for these companies to be places where they want to work, whose values align with their own. So all of these issues, equity, sustainability, accessibility, these are all the things that have really come into extremely sharp focus this past year because of the chaos around us. And I would like to think that if there is some good that comes out of all the suffering and all the unequal treatments that we have seen and all the terrible things that have happened, that perhaps some good comes out of it. And these are the things that all of us are talking about today.
Yeah, that's an excellent thing to shine a light on. And I think that response and that energy comes through really in all three of your responses as women in STEM. You can see how it's part of your identities of how you're responding to the pandemic and to the broader social and environmental situations, for saying, how can this be more than just surviving? How can this be thriving? How can this be a new way of thinking about things? How can this change our underlying values in a way that we will take forward with us past this moment?
Right.
That's really inspiring. I want to shift focus with all of you a little bit and ask if you'd be willing to share answers to a question that are maybe a little bit more personal. So the focus of our topic tonight is really about healing and resilience. Could you each share a little bit about how you think about the notion of self-care? What does that mean to you in a real way? Calbeth, can you start us off?
Yes. So self-care to me means taking time to reflect on my strengths and as well as reflect on my weaknesses in my professional and personal life. It also means owning up to my own mistakes, as well as taking time to feed my soul, my mind, and my body. So during this time of the pandemic, I've been able to exercise 3 to 4 times a week and take mental breaks when I need it, and not feeling guilty for taking mental breaks. I think as women, I think, we're kind of expected to kind of be, on the go consistently with our family, with our career, and not, and feeling guilty for, taking time to our personal selves. But I think during this time of chaos, I think it's much needed. So during the times when I feel like I have to take a break, I'm either calling family, I'm calling friends, just to have that personal interaction. And just also spending time by myself, just, watching TV, reading, things that'll bring happiness to me. So that's what self-care means to me, especially during this time.
Yeah, those are such important reminders. Thank you for that. Rose, how about you? What does this notion of self-care mean to you, especially right now?
I think this year, probably more so than any other years, I have really spend a lot of time out on the land, whether it's just hiking or walking or foraging or anything like that. And it's been really grounding for me to be able to have that access, for one. I mean, I know that a lot of us are kind of cooped up in apartments or areas where, you know, we feel compelled to wear masks because there's so many people. And I just feel very lucky to live in a place where I have space and I have the ability to move and move my body physically and be able to connect with the land and breathe fresh air. And I think those things I found are just so important to me. You know, I can tell when I like haven't gone outside all day, I've been stuck on Zoom calls or something like that. It's just like I get out and I feel the sun on my skin, and it just is so nice. And I feel like I can breathe and be in myself fully. And I also think, you know, establishing connections with people I care about is super important in this time too. I mean, I I live next to my parents, but my parents are high risk, and so, you know, finding ways to be able to connect, whether it's like sitting out on the lawn 6 feet apart, or you know, meeting up and going for a walk out in the mountains. It's just, how can I connect with the people I care about? And then how can I connect with myself? And that connection is like, okay, do I have a connection with the land? Have I, you know, done good with my body today? Have I moved? Have I, you know, petted my dog? Things like that. It's just like, it's very small things that I think really help me connect to my own self-care. And just realizing that, you know, not every day has to be jam-packed, like Calbeth was saying. Like we can just have time to breathe, and really just like watch a show without like any distractions, or read a book or anything like that. It's just like, we don't have to constantly be busy um, in order to, you know, keep our cup full, because when we have to keep our cup full by taking moments to ourselves.
Yeah, that's very well said. Thank you. How about you, Yelena? What does self-care mean to you right now?
Well, you know, it's kind of hard to add to what Rose and Calbeth have said. But you know, this year, as I mentioned before, has been a lot about taking care of others, and I thrive on it. I think this is why I'm in academia. I love talking to students. I really find this as a, not only as a passion, but I find this as an inspiration for a job at, you know, in tough times, and especially younger faculty who are just starting and lives are tough, right? You know, there are so many pressures on them. But at the same time, this is emotionally draining. And I found that this year, like no other, comes, you know, 5 or 6 in the afternoon, I am completely spent. I mean, I used to, you know, maybe take some time after dinner to do something else, to work, and on the weekend for sure. And I just need more time now, because I feel if I don't replenish and recover, and both physically and mentally, that I just can't. Sometimes there is just not another ounce of thing that I feel like I have to give. And at the same time, and you know, I've heard this a lot from students who say, you know, we shouldn't be complaining, we're lucky, you know, we are safe. But that's okay. You can complain. And you know, I catch myself. My daughter is actually a COVID nurse, and she just started working 6 months before the pandemic hit. And you know, she tells me she has lots of nights, and she comes and tells me stories. And then I tell myself, I have no right to say anything or to complain about anything. But at the same time, this is affecting, you know, everyone, including us who are grown-ups and know how to deal with these things. But you know, I find it really hard for kids, for students, right? Because social life is really part of what they need to grow up, to become mature adults, and that key portion of their lives has been kind of snatched away. So when they say, I don't know why I'm feeling like this, and you know, I should be complaining, no, you can vent, you know, get it out of your system. But there are still things you can do for yourself. So like, both of you, I exercise, I try to do this. I do things with my husband, we take time to kind of disconnect and, put the computer and the email away. I do a lot of jigsaw puzzles. For some reason, I put some show that I have already seen so that it engages my mind so I can't obsess about work things. Because if I let my mind just go, I'll start thinking. And so this way, there is something that's not so engaging that I have to watch it, but it engages my mind just enough. And then the puzzle is, you use your hands, right? And you have to concentrate. It's sort of meditative. So I was never a person who could get into meditation. I am ashamed to say, because I never had enough patience to get into this. But this is great, and it's extremely satisfying to find the piece, put it in place. Like you've done some small thing. I don't know why, but it's a thing that calms me down. It just kind of, and I'm not a hyper person, but like all of us, extremely engaged and active and so on. So this just kind of mellows me out. So whenever I have time, I have a puzzle on my dining room table right now. And I keep on going up in numbers. I went from 500 to 1,000. Now I'm at 1,500 because I guess, I need more, right? More relaxing.
That's excellent. A very practical strategy. Thank you for that. I have one last question, if you'll all permit me. And this is a question really focused on advice that you might give. So our audience tonight includes many students who are thinking about next steps for themselves. And this is a really difficult time to be planning for a career. I wonder if you all have advice you might give for women and for our male allies who are starting careers during this time. Your advice could be general, or it might focus on specific skills or techniques that you think are especially relevant and essential right now. Kelbeth, do you want to start us off with some advice?
Yeah. So advice that I would give, honestly, is find a career that makes you happy. Find a career that makes you want to get up every day and just enjoy going to work. Especially with the current times, you want to find something that brings enjoyment to your life. So that's one advice I would give. In terms of skills or techniques, definitely practice the act of active listening and effectively communicating with other people, especially during these times of COVID and COVID, racial injustice, politics, everything that's been going on in our society today. It's important to kind of dive deep with conversations and work towards active listening and understanding other people, because the way you might interpret things from another person might not be the way that they wanted you to interpret it. So it's important to learn to listen to other people and then reflect on it and then engage in conversation. So that's one thing I would say is an important skill, especially right now.
Yes, that's very well said. Thank you. Rose, advice you might offer?
Yeah, so I'm a firm believer in kind of, I guess, a practicing what you preach type manner. So like I cannot talk about health and holistic wellness in tribal communities if I am not healthy and well myself. And so that takes, daily check-ins, just, how are you doing? What have you done to nourish yourself, not just physically, but like mentally, spiritually, emotionally. And I think that's something that anybody could practice in their daily lives. Just, what gets me going spiritually, mentally, emotionally, physically, and how can I tap into that for myself so I can be of best service to other people. And, for students or people looking, for careers, it might seem a little scary right now. But I mean, we're a year into this. I know we're all just getting over like last March, because I feel like last March is like still haunting us. But we've been doing this for a while. And so we've had adjustment periods. And so if you want to pursue something and you think that that's going to be your love, you have it in you to do that. And I just think that, people may have spent this time being like, I'll wait until, this is over, or I'll wait until this moment. And we don't know when it's going to be over. We really don't. And so if you take this moment to really claim and reclaim, I think that can help you just, get started and get going. And I think just generally figure out what times in the day work best for you in terms of, how you function. So, I was writing my master's thesis and it was like 276 pages. And I found out that my schedule was best. I would just write in the morning because that's when my head is the clearest. And then the evening time is really just how I just chilled out and like watched TV or hung out with my family, or, I practiced martial arts. So that's when I would go to martial arts classes, and I would get my work done in the time that worked the best for me mentally. And then I would spend other hours of the day just connecting mentally, spiritually, emotionally, physically. So I just, find your passion, and there's going to be a way for you to accomplish it, especially if it's something that really speaks to your heart.
Oh, that's great advice. Don't wait, too. I really like that point. That's very well said. Yelena, do you have advice for women and male allies who are thinking about starting careers in this really difficult time?
It's interesting because we are talking about resilience here, and Chris, as you know, NYU has organized this series of kind of talks with deans and other people at NYU while students were in quarantine. And when they would ask me what my topic was, twice I did resilience, interestingly enough, right? And I just thought it was so pertinent to what's happening now. The companies and everybody is figuring it out, even though, yes, we're functioning, we're doing well, but things are not happening the same way as they did before. So one needs to sort of have patience and figure out what to do and how to do it. I also think it's really important to find people, and they can be your peers or professors or friends or family members or deans or anybody on this call who will listen to you and be your champions, but also challenge your thinking in some sense, right? Look at this gathering now, us all, you can send an email and, ask for help. And the other thing that I would say, and I saw one of the questions in the question and answer, how do you find out what your, lifelong passion is if you don't already know it, right? And that's a really good question. So one way is also, we are engineers, process of elimination, right? Find things you don't like, and you figure out. I remember this in school. I absolutely, and I apologize for anybody who loves it, but I didn't. I hated electromagnetics. So anything that was related to this, I said, absolutely not. I'm not going to go anywhere close to it. And I found by trying out things that what I really liked, which I think is very interesting now even now that I think of it, of mentioning puzzles. I like patterns. I like organizing things. I like understanding how things fit together. And this is where math comes in. So this work of mine on, which is called signal processing, or you can think of it as machine learning or anything like that, is really figuring out how do you put pieces together to figure out a bigger pattern so that next time you don't have to reinvent the wheel, right? So, but that's not something that all of a sudden falls on you. I knew I liked math, but I didn't know I didn't like analysis as much as I like algebra. And I think that fits also with the patterns and so on. So just try things out. And when you find out, let's say, a course in which you're doing more than it was asked from you, that's probably a good indicator that you like that. And when there is one that you're leaving for the last moment because you absolutely hate doing it, okay, you have to do it, but that's probably not what you want to do. So I think, just being kind of kind to yourself and understanding that it's not sort of a divine, inspiration all of a sudden that will fall on your head. It takes trying out and figuring out what that is. And eventually it just clicks. You'll feel it.
That's great. I'm going to pivot here. We have some wonderful questions that have been submitted by folks who are joining us online. And so I'm going to take a few of these questions and I'm going to open these up to anyone who'd like to answer. So just jump in if this resonates with you. So we have one question from Sarah Shields who asks, how can women use their positions in STEM fields to get real action around resilience and wellness, especially for underserved communities? So how can we as women in STEM use those positions to push for action?
I think I can answer it. I think for us as women, in order to elevate our voices, we just have to speak up. One of the biggest things I've learned is our voices are so strong and we carry weight. It just depends on how we go about speaking and elevating. One thing I found is if there's anything that I'm truly passionate about in terms of working with underserved communities, right now the thing that I'm very passionate about is figuring out how to improve our healthcare system, especially with improving health disparities for underserved communities. I'm out there, I'm in the trenches, I'm speaking to people. What is currently affecting them? What brings up, what changes should we bring to their specific communities? I'm talking, I'm engaging with them, and I'm not just speaking. I'm writing publications. I'm being very vocal with my voice, with my writing, with my skill set. So I think as women, I think we owe it to ourselves to utilize what we have to bring forth change. So I know with us, I think for me personally, I feel like sometimes my voice isn't as powerful, but I've realized during this time that it is. So I've been utilizing anything that I have to bring forth change. And one thing I've noticed is our voices are strong and they're powerful and they're amazing. So I think with that, we could definitely bring so much change to this world.
Thank you. Anyone else want to jump on that? Or if I may, I'll give you another related question.
I could add just
Thank
a
you.
quick little, I think in science especially, and even in health and healthcare, representation is super important. And something that I found is that when young people and young women see themselves in these certain roles, they feel empowered to be able to, pursue those positions and those careers. And so I think that the more that we can elevate our roles and our platforms as women of color in STEM, can just show all of the communities and all the young women out there that, they have a place and they have a role in these particular fields. And I think electrical engineering is so cool. And I've only met men that do that type of work, and just the way that they've explained it to me, I mean, it sounds like so much that you have to understand and figure out. And I just think that is so empowering and so exciting to have women in those roles and to just feel that empowerment so that more people can get, I guess, introduced to us. The more people that experience Indigenous people in STEM, the more that our universal understanding expands, and the more that we can understand the issues that affect different communities. And so I think that it's just really important that we're all here and that we are using our platforms to do really cool stuff. And I think, it's not going unnoticed.
That's terrific. Let me ask you a different question. This comes from one of our audience members who says, we all know, and I guess you folks know this more than most, that STEM degrees are not easy. What advice would you give to yourself as a student around balance and self-care?
Okay, maybe I'll start with this one. It's really interesting because I think students today, it's harder than it was when I was a student. Why? Perhaps because of the global availability of everything, and there is so much information and so much that you feel you could do, that I think the pressure is tremendous. I consider myself in some sense lucky on one hand that I didn't experience this pressure, right? You know, when I was a student, I worked hard, but I also remember I went out every single night, and you know, I still was a great student. It's just somehow it was, you know, you did this and it wasn't a big deal. But now when I talk to students, I mean, there is just so much expectation and so much pressure and so much weight on their shoulders that, you know, thinking how to deal with this is not an easy thing. And so a number of students also have cultural barriers to asking for help. I mean, I know when I was growing up, my mom comes from this mountainous region of ex-Yugoslavia called Montenegro, and there are these fierce women who went into wars, or actually sent, you know, men into wars because they were not good for anything else, and they, you know, like, you know, were hiding from the Germans in the mountains with the goat and survived. I mean, like crazy things, right? And, you know, sort of admitting that you're feeling down or that you're feeling insecure was essentially a sign of weakness. And that's how you grow up. I mean, that's the culture. And lots of kids today just feel uncomfortable asking for help, even though there is nothing better than hearing another human being kind of listen to you. One of the two of you said active listening. That was so important, right? That somebody listens to you, doesn't judge, doesn't immediately try to fix it. Unless, of course, you know, if you're talking to the doctor, that's a different story. But, you know, finding these ways of having somebody who kind of can give you this sense that you are understood, that you matter, that what you think and what you feel matters, and that you are understood. And it's not, it sounds like such an easy thing, but it's not. And if you have people like this in your life, I think you can almost conquer anything. But there are points when even that is not enough. And you need to ask for help from people who have seen hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of cases like yours. And that's even a higher barrier for some people to do. I know that today, you know, we all talk about the kind of mental health crisis also among the college age population. At our own university, this predates me, but Chris was here. There was an extremely disturbing period in which there were a number of suicides. So what would compel young people, you know, what are the things that happen that would push them to that step? And so it's really important to make all of us to speak up to this, to say we've all had struggles in our lives, to also say, here is the point where I'm weak. I'm not a superhero, right? But at the same time, you can acknowledge this and either work on this or work with other people, but be kind of this introspective person who also has outside support. And not everybody has that. Not everybody is lucky enough to have that. I mean, I acknowledge that. But I would say, if I would give a piece of advice, is to kind of find your support system, and that can go from family to friends to really professionals who can recognize when perhaps at times things are just too much. and one needs to take some action to take care of it.
Thank you. That's really good. Does anyone else want to add on this? Other advice for students in STEM around balance and self-care?
One thing I would like to add, so currently as a PA student at Morehouse School of Medicine, I'm basically learning everything you would learn in medical school in 27 months.
Wow.
So the first semester, it was a struggle. I was honestly very unhappy. I was stressed out. And after the second semester, I realized I couldn't do this anymore. I wasn't enjoying life anymore. I was honestly just focused on school, and that was it. And I realized in order to, be happy, I enjoy school, I enjoy what I'm doing, but at the same time, I want to have a life outside of that. So I've realized that, as students were expected, I think for us personally, and for me personally, my expectations was coming into the program, okay, I'm going to get all A's. And as students, we have this notion of if you get an A, then that means you're doing well in the class. But that's not true. You can get A's, but not necessarily understand or master the material. So for me, I've told myself, as long as I feel like I'm doing well, I feel like I'm understanding the material, I'm trying my best and owning up to my weaknesses and owning up to the fact that I might not know everything. I can ask for assistance from my peers, from my faculty, then I'm doing just fine. And with that whole idea that I've formed now, moving forward with my program, it's honestly helped me so much. I'm able to, concentrate on school, but also enjoy life outside of it and do other things that I enjoy outside of just school. So as students, yes, we want to push for, to get the great grades. We want to be the best students, but an A doesn't necessarily mean that you have mastered the material.
That's very smart. Let me ask you Rose, please go ahead.
Oh, sorry. So STEM, yeah. I probably did not remember very much from my high school biology courses, because I made the jump from undergrad, Bachelor of Arts to a Master's of Science. And so that big leap into the STEM world, I mean, I just approached it with like completely open eyes, like just like a little science baby, so to speak. And I was a master's student, taking undergraduate biology courses. And I think that in itself was just like, it was a really cool experience because I got to meet other students that I wouldn't usually meet, because the master programs are pretty small and you kind of know everybody in there. And so being able to open myself up to those connections, and really just taking it all in and not thinking, oh, I'm a master student, like I'm above all this, was just really gratifying and a good experience for me to have, because I learned so much from those students. I learned so much from those professors that maybe I wouldn't have had access to if I had done those biology courses at a different university in undergrad. And so being fairly new to the STEM world, being open to experiences, being open to, different clubs or different groups, or, what are some organizations in your area that support what you're interested in and what career you're pursuing and what particular STEM discipline. From that master's program, I enrolled in a Montana Master Naturalist program, and that just kind of expanded on what I had already learned, but still wanted to continue to learn. So, we can be students, but I think we never stop becoming students if it is something that we are genuinely passionate about.
Such good answers. Let me ask you a lighter question, or what might be a lighter question. And this is one for each of you. What are you reading right now? Or what have you read during the pandemic that inspires you personally or professionally?
Okay, I'll start. Kind of a number of different things. I think I'm in the middle of several. I know for some reason I'm having trouble going from beginning to till the end of one book, but you know, I just kind
It's a pandemic, you know.
It's a pandemic, I think. Yeah, I bought President Obama's book, Promised Land, and boy, can he write. I mean, you know, apart from the fact that he writes really well and it's super interesting, I find it really, again, introspective. I like the fact that you can sort of understand the man and understand the position, and that the two at times are at odds, right? And, you know, he seems to be very honest about this. And I found this inspiring. Then, you know, I read the Notorious RBG book that, I don't know, it's called Notorious RBG. And then I was reading a book because I listened to a podcast about Churchill and leadership in the times of trouble when London is being bombed by the Germans during the Blitzkrieg. It's called The Splendid and the Vile, and it's really inspiring. He was a flawed man, but the way he kind of inspired the country to go through an unimaginable horror that went night after night after night for months was quite astounding. So I recommend all three. They're great. Though I have not finished neither President Obama's book nor the Churchill one. I'm like 2/3 done.
That alone is impressive. What about other panelists? Are you reading anything, or have you read anything in the pandemic that has inspired you professionally or personally?
For me, so this book, it's called You Are a Bad, and then ASS. So,
Great.
So it's basically a book about like as women or as just people in general, stop doubting your greatness. For me, and I think for so many other people, I've struggled with imposter syndrome. So always feeling like, you know, I don't belong. Why should I, you know, have this specific position? Am I going to be great at it? Things like that. And I think the book has definitely encouraged me to stop doubting myself, that there's a reason why I'm here. And even if I might still feel incompetent, or I might not have as much confidence as I should, eventually I'll get there. So I should just own up to the fact that there's a reason I'm here. I'm going to do great things, and just be confident with that. So that's one book that I would definitely encourage everyone to read.
That sounds excellent. Thank you. Rose, anything you're reading you want to share?
Sure. Well, I think I've had my fair share of reading like mystery thriller books in the pandemic. I think it's a sense of like escapism from just the day-to-day life. And I'm like, oh, okay, can I solve this mystery? Like, what's going on here? But I think one book that I really enjoyed reading was What the Dog Saw by Malcolm Gladwell. And I know he's written a bunch of really exceptional books, but there was just something about it, like each chapter is based on a short story he wrote, and it really challenges you to think about the world that you're situated in, and, you know, like, why are things the way they are? Like, why are there 23 different flavors of ketchup and only like 2 standard flavors of, oh wait, no, I switched that around. 23 flavors of mustard and only 2 standard flavors of ketchup. And it's just like one of those things that you just kind of like see, but you don't really question it. And it just really like got me thinking. I was like, yeah, what are some other things that like I just kind of blatantly accept but don't really fully understand? And I think that was just a really good way to challenge my own worldview and perspective. And he's just got some really cool stories in there that are super fun to read too.
Oh,
And he's fantastic to listen to if you have a chance on your long nature walks. Instead of for his books, I would always buy audiobooks because he's an amazing reader, he himself. They're great.
Sweet. Thanks for the tip.
There you go.
what good tips. I think this might be a very good place to bring our session to a close. And I want to start that close by thanking our panelists. This has been such a delightful conversation. I wish that we were in a situation where I could invite you all over for dinner and just continue this discussion. Thank you for your generosity in sharing your careers with us and your strategies and your sense of hope. I hope that this is going to rub off in important ways for everybody that's joining us in this conversation tonight. So thank you sincerely. And I want to turn it over to our colleague, Rosa Empuero, to close us out.
Thank you so much, Chris. And thank you so very much to our panelists, Yelena, Calbeth, and the other Rose. You've been fantastic. You've been wonderful. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I want to thank you for your time. Chris, you've always so gracious. Thank you for doing this for us. I haven't seen you in person in a couple of years, but it's so wonderful that you were able to join us tonight. So thank you to all of you. This concludes the Women in STEM Summit. I do want to take an opportunity to thank the Student Affairs staff. We did the STEM Summit a little bit differently this year or this semester, and everybody took on a program, and this is our fourth program of the week, and I'm very happy at the way everything turned out, and I hope that our students were able to get a lot out of it. So thank you, Deanna, Sarah, Brittany, Mike, Alethea, Bonnie, and Randy, who coordinated everything under one umbrella. And of course, our GAs who are in the background, Izzy, Sahara, Elisa, Rebecca, and Sarah L. Sorry, I had to write that down, but I wanted to make sure that I wouldn't forget anybody. Thank you, everybody. Please get a good night's rest. You know, we are almost at the end. I keep saying that we are almost at the end. We can see the light at the end of the tunnel. Thank you again, and see you next year.